Yo, DeSantis is in Florida wilding, and we want to talk about how that's going to affect you, if it will, and get your thoughts because I know the four of us got a lot of opinions on the other side.
Audio Jungle.
Well, welcome back to another episode of South Star Classroom. I'm Charles. That's David. That's Jube. And that's Omar. It's very, very good to be with you all. And let's just go around real quick. I'm going to start with David. How have you been, man? What is new with you?
Thank you, Charles. Good to be here with everybody. What's new? Let's see. I was traveling last week for work. Got to visit Oakland. It had been a minute. So it was good to be back in the town, doing some work for a school organization up there that serves a very high needs student demographic. So it was a good trip. It was busy. Other than that, I've been getting back into my exercise routine. It's less about trying to take off weight, which I need to do, but just more about feeling good. So I just got done with a pretty extensive bike ride. So if I seem a little fired up, you know why.
Hey man, that's what's up, man. We proud of you, brother. Let's set some share goals. I can be an accountability partner because I need to do it myself. Oh, how are you doing, good brother?
Things are good, man. I had my main man, Chris Arlene from Philadelphia, come in and visit this past weekend. He wanted to see the schools. He was around when I was barely talking about the organization as an idea. And when everyone's like, yeah, okay, whatever, Omar, you're gonna do what? And then from hearing that idea to actually walking in and seeing our schools, our central office, and realizing, oh, this is real. It was really cool for him to get a chance to see the actualization of everything that I kind of dreamt about back then. Other than that, I feel you, David. I too am working on ensuring that I stay healthy, but I'm doing a lot of mental health as well. Like I said last time, reading a good book, understanding some of my past constraints, sharing vulnerabilities, journaling a ton. So to our audience, man, just a shout out to mental health and physical health. Take care of yourself.
That's what's up, man. That's what's up. And Jubilee, how are you doing today? And will your co-star be making making their presence felt? Omar stepped in for you last week with his own damn dog. So how are you,
Very
Jubilee?
nice. Very nice. I am doing very, very well. I've been working on a project, a diversity project. So it's very interesting that we're talking about this topic today. In reviewing this certain organization's policy handbook through a diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility lens. So that's where my work has been. I have been dreaming about going on a treadmill. I've been dreaming about it, getting back, actually on the treadmill. So maybe I'm going to make that happen. And I put together my own show. I got a live band and all that jazz. This Friday, I'm going to do a closed studio session, pre-recording and all that. So you'll see that on my social media as well. So I'm doing the things. And yes, Meadow V. Rose may make an appearance on the screen just for you, Charles.
Is Meadow the Rose? Is that?
Well, to you, it's Meadow the Rose because, you're so petty with it because you're not a dog lover, because you don't understand that dogs are humans. So it's Meadow the Rose to you.
Well, dogs are fine. Dogs are fine. Dogs are not humans. They're actually not close at all. But love your dog. I don't care. But I will just say I'm doing well. It's been very, very busy time, but I am happy to be seeing y'all, and I'm excited for this conversation. And Jubilee, you're going to give us basically just the facts and details about this topic. So you are arbiter today. It is all you.
Okay, I'm going to try my very best. So Ron DeSantis, governor, is banning and working to defund diversity programs in schools. I'm trying to say it as plainly as I can. He just signed a number of bills into act, and there are several states that are planning to follow suit. And so I just want to share this quick thing. It says GOP lawmakers are wanting to dismantle DEI programs on campuses in at least 3 ways: striking down diversity statements that are used for hiring or promotions or any form of consideration for admissions, ending required social curriculum, and eliminating offices in charge of facilitating diversity efforts. And several have said their claim is that these diversity programs breed division rather than inclusivity and unity. So what do you think about that?
Well, let's just jump in. We got the facts.
Well, look at
David looks like he's having a reaction. So
a vein right here in the center of his forehead. David, it's on you. What's going on? Because you already put your head down. What's going on?
Yeah. So this is interesting. I think the timing is interesting too. With we talked about it before the show. The announcement that is going to be made, I think, formally tomorrow, that DeSantis is throwing his hat into the ring for the upcoming presidential election. So, we'll see what happens with that. But he's obviously making moves in Florida, and today we're talking about this pushback on DEI. And really anything having to do with looking at race in any kind of like critical lens. And it's interesting to see other states kind of follow suit. I think before we really dive into it, it's a very interesting. I don't know if we've actually been here before as a country, as a nation, where people feel the need to just kind of push reset and say, okay, we're all starting from the same starting point, and we are not allowed to look back in terms of history and our journeys and the journeys of our people to understand, why we are not united as a people, right? And so I think this unity thing is, I'm not buying it, but anyhow.
Right.
I am intentionally trying to not. Okay. Omar, your thoughts. Take it away.
I wanted to take a quick step back. And like, just for our audience, just for like the layman group, what are these equity and inclusivity projects? How do universities or companies
and this is
carry
only
this
universities,
out?
right? He's not talking about K-12, isn't it? Just like colleges? Okay.
Yeah, I think So what are they? How do universities carry it out? And what's the point? Can we start there just so that our audience has like some context before I jump in? So I could do that, but like, I want our host to jump in and explain what the heck these things are, unless of course someone else would like to explain. But Jubilee, take the lead here. What are these things?
Yeah, so I'll just do a breakdown of DEI and A. I think it's just like what I was saying on one of my client projects, right? So the D, do we have all the things on the plate? That's just the most simple way that I can say it, right? Do you have your starch? Do you have your veggies? Do you have your protein like on the plate? Like, is everyone represented, right? Representation does not mean inclusivity, right? So there's the I for, okay, do you have all the things on the plate? Are they commingling? Are they, having conversations, right, at the table, right? Equity, right, not to be confused with equality, right? Does every single person that is represented and commingling and giving input at the table also have access to resources, right, that they need so that they can thrive, regardless of what everyone else has? Do they specifically have the measure that they need of whatever that resource is so that they can thrive, right? So this person might need a ladder. This person might need a step stool, right? And that is equity because it is based on where that person is and what they need, as opposed to giving everyone a step stool or everyone a ladder. And then lastly, accessibility, right? So now that we have everyone that's on the plate having a conversation together and they have access to all the resources that they need, are we approaching them in a way that they can understand whatever the content is, so that we can also come to a consensus together. We are not taking a one-size-fits-all approach in terms of how you access information, and so in terms of how you engage with conversation, right? We are figuring out how to make this information as palatable as possible for you so that you can access it, understand, and engage. So that is
That's a
the
good
IA.
metaphor.
Yes. Did you have a B part that you wanted me to
Yes.
answer?
So how would a university use this to benefit what goal? So
Yes.
2 questions.
Absolutely. And so as a university, when thinking about admissions, really generally it's been more around the diversity piece. Again, I think as a nation, I don't know, I think we've come a long way. Well, some universities have come a long way. Did you know that Harvard is like the #1 campus for diversity? Like, you know, in terms of they're at the top of the diversity list, Harvard, in terms of Ivy League. Anyhow, so when we think about say the question again. Now I lost my train of thought because I went on a tangent about Harvard. Omar.
All good. Yeah, my
admissions.
unmute takes a little while. So it's basically like, how do universities use this, and what's the goal? What's the point?
Yes, got it. So the whole point is, right, to mirror the workplace, right? So we have all of our babies, they're growing up, they're going to college, they're going to get this education. And one of the primary points of having this experience is for it to mirror the experience of what the real world will be like, right? And the real world here in America is a diverse world. We have people of all different, genders, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, etc. And so it is important for our children to have that as a baseline, right? Additionally, right, it also connects to ingenuity, innovation, collaboration, right? And so as a nation, these are some of the things, people may beg to differ, that have helped us to thrive as a nation, right? So having a diverse workforce, people that are coming from all walks of life, all different belief systems, have only strengthened us as a nation. For those that believe that we should be a diverse nation and use this as a lens with which to admit students into universities.
Okay.
So
let me go ahead.
So let's I feel like we're getting at the actual like thing that we're talking about. So you provided like the backdrop and the philosophy around it, but if these things go through, which they are going through, obviously, what are the actual processes and procedures that universities in, say, Florida will be barred from conducting? What are the actual activities that are going to be banned?
Well, so I'll answer it this way. So basically the idea is you're just going to get in based on merit, right? Just based on merit. What are your test scores? We're not going to be looking at any of these other reasons for maybe why you didn't meet our mark, which probably was a poorly informed, unfairly distributed mark. But we're not using that. Like, who are you on paper? What scores do you have? You know, maybe we're going to look at your SES, but that's that. We're going to give everyone the same starting point. We don't care what color you are. We don't care where you're from. We don't care what your ancestors did. We don't even care. We may not even care how much your family makes. What are your scores? What'd you get on your SAT, if that'll still be a thing? So basically, yes, that. No caveats.
So affirmative action, right?
That's one of them, yes.
And then there's a piece around hiring, like the affirmative action piece is around admissions, and then the universities employ, tens of thousands of people. And it's my understanding that they will no longer be allowed to use any kind of like I think they use quotas, right, to hire teaching positions, staff positions, et cetera, right?
Yes.
So
That's the
how
best.
look, I do have a weird, like not a weird question. I just have a question because like I'm confused about this. This is at least my like maybe understanding or misunderstanding. From what I understood from like affirmative action, like way back then, right? Like trying to remember the Supreme Court case was you're going to
Baki.
make the bet. Yeah, thank you. BAKKE, right?
Yep.
You're trying to make the best case concerted effort to make up for hundreds of years of inequality and so forth, and therefore your goal is to create diversity, but they also, from what I understood, like they've got to be qualified. So like everyone brings like the fact that, oh, you're unqualified, so that's why you got in. Like I take that personally because I've shared on this program a few times that my closest friend Tim's, mom was like, oh, the only reason you got into Stanford was because like you're Mexican. I'm like, girl, like, no, like 4.5, 30 on, exactly. Like, trying to remember what the hell I got on the SAT. It was like a 31 or 32 out of 35, like all the things, right? Now, I bring this up because it was like, there's a huge qualification component, and that's, hey, we're going to make a concerted effort to find qualified Latinos and Blacks and Indigenous and, Pacific Islanders, Native Americans. I think, is there an understanding that like the DI, diversity, inclusion, and equality, DIE, is that right?
DIA.
DIA, thank you. Is there like a specific understanding that like it's not so much like affirmative action, we're going to make our best case effort. It's like, nope, we are absolutely going to ensure that all of these folks are integrated. So it's no longer like this is a best case scenario. It's like it's a mandatory scenario. Is that correct? Because like I don't actually know.
Yeah. So I don't have so I'll speak loosely on it, but based on what I've studied, really it's just been about the bare minimum, right? And about numbers, right? So an investment in terms of numbers, right? So if you are admitting this many students, this percentage, at least this percentage, needs to
Should
be representing this group.
Yeah, like representative of the community. So like if Latinos are 20% of America, we should at least have 20% of our population be Latino.
Yes, or of any underrepresented group for that university, right? So like if it's know, right? So if it's 100% white, it's like, well, damn, we ain't got no Black people here, so we need to at least commit to admitting 10% Black people, right? But that's what the law and those stipulations would hold universities accountable for, right? So you didn't have any wiggle room around that.
Yeah.
And now you might.
Well, I don't, like I said, just listening. I mean, when this comes up, right, it makes me think about just larger questions. Like, why is DeSantis doing this? Why now? And let's just be, we want the people to listen. And as we talk, critical thinkers and understand what's happening, right? There's an election that's about to come up. There's a Democratic president that they do not want to see win, but there's also this other guy lurking in the back that a lot of Republicans and Democrats are afraid of, named Donald Trump. Donald Trump is currently super ahead in the polls. It's like Donald Trump, a whole bunch of space, and then DeSantis and the Republican field. And what it feels like is that DeSantis needs eyeballs. He needs actual policy. Like DeSantis wants to, when they get into these primaries, wants to say, look, I've done this and I've done this and I've done this. And DeSantis knows his base, and he knows his base loves Trump. So I think he's trying to prove that he's not as flippant as Trump might be, and he knows how to absolutely work policy. Now, how this affects people, like I think that's a deeper conversation. I think that there are extremes on both sides of this thing. I think that there are extreme people. There are conservative people that are so afraid of what this history means, of what their kids are being told. Like they don't want to have to explain when their kids come home and say, Daddy, I heard you were a bad man, or Mommy, you a bad person, or this, that, and the third. And I think a lot of things get conflated. I also have seen on other sides where everything has become a DEI situation, and like it's like, oh, but there's no there in some of those cases there hasn't been there. I don't think that's the majority of cases. I don't think that that's like the larger thing. I actually think DEI, when done well, is an asset, and it is needed for apparent reasons that we can discuss. But I just wanted to, I think that as American people, you are about to be emotionally yo-yoed from the left, from the right, for the upcoming months until we get through this next election. And you're about to see a whole bunch of pandering. You're about to see people go into brown neighborhoods and try to speak Spanish. You're about to see people go into black neighborhoods and meet up with black churches that they ain't never stepped foot in before. And I think it's going to be interesting. So on this DEI thing, I'm just interested like in having this conversation, because I know this is something that you had like cared about, Jube. And, you know, with the work that you're doing, how do you feel like, how you feel like is this having an impact on you at all? And if so, how?
I mean, I think it is, because it's really, I'm looking at the root. You know, I'm a root girl. Always go back to the root, and I am wondering about the level of investment, you know, that we have as a country, and I go back to wondering like who really should be making this decision, right? Who should be working to uphold the whole "We the People" statement. And so that I have a question mark, because that's how I feel. It's just like people will do anything if there's a dollar, you know, connected to some level of an incentive. People will do it. Corporations will do it. Schools will do it, right? But when you move that away, are people truly invested, you know, in this work? And I find that it's not so much. People want to know how to check the boxes, right? And I'm trying not to share like too many of my opinions, but I think that's it. Like when I read this article,
you can give opinions now. We just need to get the facts out there. Yeah.
Well, I just when I read the article, so many things ran through my mind. One of them is that education, as we know it, and the way that these politicians are making these decisions and running it into the ground, they're going to make education as we know it absolutely obsolete. And we're going to have a generation of children that are going to learn from TikTok and YouTube, because that might be the only place they can find the truth. That might be the only place that they can engage in some kind of dialogue that has varying perspectives, right? And not just the ones that make our country look good, right? And I think when I think about DEIA, this is the last thing I'll say, and I'll throw it back. Right? I remember, like, I've been to DC to the beautiful African American museum, and I remember the first time going and driving down the block and realizing that there's like, and don't get me wrong, I might not have the name perfect, but it's like the American Museum is like on that same strip, and I'm like, well, why? What? But if we're a part of like American history, and I don't mind it, I love it. I think we should definitely have our own museum with all the things. But like, what is that American History Museum saying about the Black experience, like in America? Why do we have to go build a whole separate thing, right? And so over time, when people feel like they are not heard, not represented, right, they're going to create a narrative. They're going to create or create space to tell that story. And I think that because of the lack of investment in DIA in our country and by many of these politicians, that is what our young people are going to end up doing.
I want to go back just maybe a couple of minutes ago when Charles was talking. I don't know if anybody else picked this up, but the way that he was pronouncing Ron DeSantis' last name, it sounded like he was like adding some kind of like Latino tinge to it. You were saying Ron DeSanchez. Was that intentional?
No, I did not do that.
Give this guy some clout.
I didn't do that at all.
It sounded like it.
I think that you got a bad connection. I said DeSantis. I might have had
a
Southern accent.
Is that like Ted Cruz winding up?
I would never do that.
Ted, but like some of these other cats going more Latino, like Beto O'Rourke, when the man's like Irish.
I would never do that.
Irish white.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you.
I'll probably ask Ron then. How about that? He's just Ron then.
Just call him Ron, but then Ron, I'm not gonna jump on that. I'm gonna leave it alone because Ron gives me something else.
But I mean, but look, but this is the thing though, right? Like,
Little
look,
Ron.
no, let's jump on it, right? Let's have a conversation. Like, we forget the cameras, forget all the people. This is for friends, right? Like, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this cat, and how you feel about like what the people that's watching, right? That may not work in education, that may not know why this is or is not important. Like the question that you asked, I think is a good one. Like, is this going to be a threat for Black and brown students across the country? Like, what do we think is going to actually happen? And again, y'all know how I am with this, and I'm gonna throw it back to you all. And Jube, I think you should take the A mic on it, right?
Yep.
There's a right answer, and I think there's a real answer. I know the right answer. Like, we all know the right answer, and I think a lot of people watching know what the right answer is. But like, when you at the crib and you got a drink, maybe mine the scotch, and this comes up, I'm probably talking about it a little different. Like, I'm probably talking about it like, yo, this cat knows that white people are scared right now. Like, he knows that these people feel like they're being left behind. And the one thing I learned in college, I read a great book, What's the Matter with Kansas? If you haven't read it, I think it's a really good book. But it was basically talking about how you keep poor people, especially poor white people, under your power. And one of the thesis of the book was they got to feel better than somebody. And it's usually Black people. So it's like, there's a lot of people in this country that feel like, damn, well, I'm poor and I'm messed up and things are happening here. And you mean to tell me I'm still responsible for slavery? I'm still responsible for this. I'm still responsible for that. And he's playing on it. He's playing on these people's emotions. And I think that the left is helping, because I think that these are good initiatives that had a good heart and a good soul. And I think that there are grifters everywhere. I think that they just are. And you're able to conflate those things. So when you saw this, Jude, and you read this and you're doing this work and you specialize in doing DEI work, like, what does DeSantis, now I'm thinking about it, right? DeSantis,
Yeah.
DeSantis,
Ron.
What? Jesus, DeSantis.
DeSantis.
I'm so, listen, man, I'm gonna name some Black names that y'all can probably mess up too, but my grandmama's was named Ozetta and Ernestine. I'm gonna let you say those. But seriously though, what do you think? What do you think Ron DeSantis is like impact is gonna be on people that we tend to care about, if any? I'm just really curious to hear if y'all think there's something gonna happen.
I do think something's going to happen. I think it's going to be the same thing that happens with every other initiative connected to education and politics. It's going to be a pendulum swinging back and forth, another war, and then we're still going to be asking, what about the children overall? But like, reading it's annoying. It's annoying because I think it's too much power for a governor to have. I think it's too much power for a politician to have to decide that, you know what, we're going to remove our country's responsibility to ensure that we are inclusive and we are diverse. Like, we have no problem being diverse to benefit us as a capitalistic nation, but like, on the real, we don't really want to be diverse. Like, we know, like, we brought y'all, you know, you and your people over here, like on the slave ships and stuff, and we got free labor for hundreds of years, all that. And we're so happy that we were able to get this dollar. But we didn't really think about what it meant when y'all had to stay. So, you know, we just like that's really what it triggered for me. That there's no investment, and this should not be, I don't think it should be a state decision. I don't think that this should be led by governors. I think it should be something that's a collective, we the people decision, that we are, it doesn't matter what America does at this point. We are a diverse nation. You can say whatever you want. Right? My parents are immigrants. Anybody else on here, parents immigrants or came from someplace other than the United States of America, right? Some of these rich, wealthy people, they have parents that were not born here, et cetera, et cetera. This country is built just like that. And so why are we, so to me, diversity is a pillar of this country. Why are we putting it into the hands of a state governor or the state, government to tell us that we don't need to be honoring any sort of education that helps us to maintain that as a country? Those are my thoughts.
I got a totally different take on this one, just to take it in a radically different direction. Because Charles, you're like, you know, what would you say if you were having scotch among friends? Like,
Yeah,
my
scotch
first
it
question
up.
would be like,
Or a
would be
nice
like,
rosé, Jubilee.
yeah, like, who is this for? Because, like, I've got a question and a hypothetical, right? Like, who is this for? Because on one end, like, we all know who this is for. It's like, hey, you're trying to, you know, drum up the Trumpers. You're trying to drum up that like far right. But if you look at the polling of 18 to even now 45-year-olds, it's exaggerated 18 to 35, but even consistent 45-year-olds across countries, across states, those young people are all about wanting a diverse situation, wanting to be in diverse scenarios, wanting to be in diverse workplaces, wanting to be in diverse colleges. So it's kind of like, yo, is he like trying to make like a recruitment video to be like, yo, come to Florida, the white enclave? Because like, will
Yes.
kids leave? Because if they're like, oh, yo, I'm not going to get any diversity and inclusion in these Florida institutions, is he trying to make like, I don't know, like the Aryan state and shit? Because like, will those kids who are seeking to have diversity in their lives and their college experiences, because it is extremely important for millennials and Gen Z and the next generation, who I think is like alpha, I don't know, to have that, will they go? And like, does that then ostracize the young voters, which then brings up the question, like, who is this for? Is he just going after the base? Is he just relying on like the retired people? Because like on one end, it's confusing, right? Because DeSantis is like, come to Florida, it's gonna be the white enclave. But then he's like, I'm destroying Disney. So once you get here, you ain't gonna have anything fun to do. And it's
I don't
gonna
think
be
so, bro.
totally
But you don't think he believes this stuff? You think that this is, do you think that this is purely political? Like he's just really trying to draw people in, draw voters? Or do you think that this is something that he really believes?
Oh man, that's such a good question. I actually don't think he believes this shit. I actually think that he's a sycophantic, totally like self-absorbed, ambitious, like trip knot of a human being that doesn't like Tucker Carlson. It's now perfectly
middle
on
of the
tape.
road now, baby. He left Fox and he is middle of the road on Twitter.
Yeah, man.
So,
and he's on text being like, I hate Trump. I don't believe in any of this stuff. And yet he's spouting this stuff out because, like, yeah, it's making millions of dollars.
I mean,
I think DeSantis.
He got fired for it, right? I mean, Jubilee, I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you up on what happened?
no,
So basically,
inform me.
So they got sued because of the voting machine stuff. And in those things, they found like text messages and things like that. But Tucker Carlson was like, he lost. Like, why are we doing this? This is kind of crazy. And then Tucker Carlson would go on his #1 show in the country and then do whatever. But also Tucker Carlson is very expensive, and they just had to spend. I mean, they lost so much money, and that's lawsuit #1. There are more coming. So Tucker Carlson has now reemerged on Twitter, and he's now a little bit more. He's still a right-wing person, but he's a little bit more center of the road. Here's what I think though about Ron. I think Ron believes this the same way Gavin believes in his liberal stuff. And let me tell you what I mean. I think that I have met Gavin Newsom. I know Gavin Newsom. He's a cool guy. He is seen as an ultra liberal. I know in his actions, he is not that very ultra liberal. I know that he is, during the pandemic when everybody was locked up, he had a party in his vineyard. You know what I'm saying? I think DeSantis is very much the same. I think they are both professional politicians, though. And I think that I think that these are calculated plays. You are not at this stage as a DeSantis, I'm gonna get that right. I know DeSantis, I don't know, man. Now I'm gonna do it
Sanchez.
Because no, that's not even the right brown group. But sorry, I can't pronounce it. Ron. But seriously, I think everything at this point for these people is calculated. I think everything is poll driven. I think it is, so hey, my constituency feels uncomfortable with LGBTQ issues happening in Disney characters colliding. So this is what I'm going to do. And the way I'm going to separate myself from Trump, who believes these same things or says it, I'm going to have policy to back me up. I think that New York and California are saying, hey, if you want a liberal enclave, come here. Come to California. You might you're gonna pay a lot of taxes.
Yeah,
but,
you come to California now. Yeah.
But here's the thing though, right? Even our Republican isn't all that Republican. You know what I'm saying? Schwarzenegger is much more a fiscal Republican than he is a social one. I think DeSantis and I think that Abbott is the same. You know what I'm saying? I think Abbott is also like, look, what am I going to do? Like Donald Trump is a huge orbital figure in politics right now. And all these people are trying to figure out DeSantis does not want to become Jeb Bush II. And again, I'm going into poli-sci nerd area. But does anybody remember what happened to Jeb? Does anybody remember what happened to Jeb?
Hell yeah!
Jube, we're getting real nerdy, Jube, and I'm gonna land this plane and give it back to you. But let me just, do you know what happened to Jeb real quick? If you for the context?
No, teach me. What
In
happened?
30 seconds. Jeb was the heir apparent. He was supposed to be the next in line. He was a right-wing person, but he was a little bit more centrist. You know, he was trying to bring that back. And then Donald Trump gets completely humiliated and emasculated him. Like he effectively ended his political career.
Him up.
And people remember. And so I know that was long-winded, but this is me talking with some scotch in me, right? Like one, you got to know the game that's being played, but two, you do have to ask real questions of how will this impact me or my community, or what is this signposting? Because I think once you start seeing schools in California start to do it, because I'm gonna tell you this, it's a lot of people in left-leaning places that don't like all that stuff either. It's a lot of people that feel like they're being demonized, and you can ignore them or you can engage them, but I would not ignore anything that Ron is
I was going to quickly bring that up more as a question, and like Jube, David, like take it, but like, dude, history repeats itself. Didn't this exact same thing happen with Berkeley?
Yeah, I mean that happened. Berkeley happened more as a affirmative action. I think this was an important note that Jubilee brought up, and I don't want it to get lost. This is DEI practices across. So students is a piece of it. We're talking about hiring practices. We're talking about doing those. We'll step in if you got this, or step out if you do that, right? We're talking about the sensitivity trainings. Like, we're talking about this new language that is kind of being thrust on people. He is trying to defund all of that, because people like it's not just affirmative action. Affirmative action cases are happening. Like, and you're about to see there's this chasm right now between Black people and Asian people because of the lawsuits at Harvard and other places around. So this isn't happening in a vacuum. And so I didn't mean to take up all that space, Drew. You got to jump in when we start going though.
It's okay. I'm over here DJing between Meadow barking and you. It's fine. So here we are. But David, I'd love to hear from you. I'm over here thinking about what if higher education wasn't as important as we have made it to be. Like, so I want to reread the question. Because I want us to really.
That's a long ass answer you just put in there. I can't keep it up.
Somebody asked what is. I just put the definition. I'll delete it later, but somebody asked, and I'm like, let me just put this definition in there real quick. It's all DI.
It's all good.
David, what do you think? Meanwhile, like, we're blanking out his face.
So I'm back to this question. So I really, David, if you can take it, but I want us to really talk about both sides, right? Is the elimination of diversity and equity initiatives a threat or an incentive for Black and brown students across our country? Like, is it a threat or is it an incentive? Of course, I have 1,000 thoughts on it, but I'd love to hear what you got to say, Dave.
I would say overall, it is a threat, right? And the only reason I say that is because, and I don't know if I like fully support the full spectrum of what's happening right now. You know, I've been part of it. I've been on both sides of the table. I've run organizations, and I've seen the power in it, and I've also seen the potential for it to like enable people in certain ways that just aren't good for, if you're running a school for children. Where I hone in is two things. I was a product of affirmative action, right? And what that looked like for me was the child of two parents that were farm workers and didn't know. They didn't. My parents, not even, never one time told me, "Mijo, you got to go to college." They didn't even know, right? It wasn't even like a thing. But they made sure that we went to school. And when I was in high school, I remember as part of this California initiative when affirmative action was happening, certain students with certain GPAs and certain backgrounds, like me, Mexican American, had access to like specific counselors in high school, not the regular high school counselors, but these are people coming from the UC. They were Asian, they were African American, they were Latino, that would come in and double up on their support for people like me, right? To say like, here's what you have to do. Here are your options. Here's how you fill out financial aid. All the things that I wasn't quite getting from home. And eventually I followed that path and I went to college. When I was in college, I had access to services at UCSD that were specific to people of my background and skin color, both on the kind of like social end in terms of clubs, mecha, et cetera, and then also access to tutoring because I was way in above my head academically, wasn't quite ready, but I had extra services. And I eventually graduated. And when I graduated with my class, and then we had a Chicano graduation. That was a separate rite of passage for people of a similar background, right? Yeah. And so I think those things are all incredibly valuable. And then, here I am. The other thing I want to put out there is, and I know we were getting off on like a political tangent on, in terms of like what DeSanchez is doing. That's fine. But
did you just say DeSanchez?
Yeah.
Because David, he needs to admit that he just wants to change his name to that.
Ronnie D, baby. I'm sorry. Go ahead,
but
David.
Here's the thing. I mean, it's like if you are
D.
like what the role of government, we're talking about the role of government, right? The government can support or they can take away these programs. But the role of government really is to like look at society, look at the human condition, look at people's access to housing, access to healthcare, access to education, outcomes, life outcomes, break it down by race, by demographic. And we have an achievement gap in society, right? That mirrors the academic achievement gap that we have in schools. And so not saying DEI is going to solve it all, but there are other programs that can be supported. Like again, I don't think I support the whole thing, the hiring based on quotas. I've been there. I don't know if that's the path, but the role of government is to figure this out. And if you say you're going to start, let's restart, let's all just get along, let's be unified as a people, I'm like, no, because people have struggled historically based on our history, and you cannot look away at that, and I feel like that's kind of it's no skin off his back, he's an established person. I don't know, I just feel like you're walking away at some point. That's negligent when you walk away and say, we're not going to help people that have historically been oppressed. We're going to hit the reset button. That's some like pull yourself up by your bootstraps bullshit. I wonder if people would feel the same if it was Tim Scott that was bringing this message forward to dismantle DEI.
Thank you for that. So you got me over here. My wheels are turning because one, you got me thinking, what did, people of color or Black people in this country do when they didn't want to let us into their, whether it was a movie theater, businesses or whatever. We figured it out and we built our own, and these kinds of things make me feel like we're eventually going to move back to that, because the system that is created is really to get into majority white institutions that don't want to give a Black kid or a Latino kid a second look, right? And so this Black kid from Brooklyn, New York, who always was in gifted and talented honors or whatever, got to high school and decided I was going to cut my entire 10th grade year. That wasn't because I was Black. It's just because it was cool. And so I cut my entire 10th grade year, right? Then ended up having to do 8 straight periods in 11th grade, no lunch, PM school. So I was going to school from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., from 3:30 p.m. to 5:10 p.m., and school on Saturdays to make up all the credits I missed. that also was not because I was Black. It was because of the choices that I made, right? Now, 12th grade year comes, and what do they look at? They look at 11th grade and 10th grade scores, not 12th grade, right? And so we had guidance counselors that did not want to talk to us because I was not in the top, percentile of the class or whatever, right? Very little resources around that. 3,000 kids in my school. I'm like, how in the world do you get into college, right? Nope, you're gonna go to a 2-year school because that's what you've earned pretty much. And it's like, no, I want to go to a 4-year school. Well, it was diversity, right? It was a program called EOP that had allotment from the government that was like, listen, you're going to go to these urban communities and you're going to give these kids a second look. Matter of fact, you're going to give them a first look because that's the point of your program. And it was through EOP that opened the portal and the pathway for me to go to a 4-year college, right? With a mentor, with subsidized, room and board and tuition and all of that for 4 years, right? And so that is necessary. So part of it, the Black part was the SES part, right? That my parents are from Jamaica and Trinidad, 2 working class parents, could not afford tuition, right? And so I did my part, right? I screwed up. I fixed it. I earned all my credits, but now I was in a position where because of it was a majority white institution, most likely they would not have looked at me, right? But because of this program and because I did my part and my parents, they were Black and they were also working class, close to poor, this program allowed me to get into college.
Yep.
Right? So
yeah. I want to get at this question here.
That's a good question.
I don't know if I know the answer to this, but maybe somebody does. So, I don't know the answer to the answer to the question is like, probably. But so this thing that they're doing in Florida and other states, does it apply to, so I'm thinking in Florida, you have private schools that are HBCUs and you have public universities that are also identified as HBCUs. Does this apply to both public and private universities? I'm just thinking about like the larger public, historically racist and white supremacist institution that we know as like
if we're talking about higher ed. But if we're talking about higher ed, I think you talking about the law or?
Yes.
Yeah. Does it apply to all universities?
From my understanding, anywhere anywhere where you can take federal, where you can take state funds to utilize, that's what it would touch. It's basically that. See, that's all the power that the feds and the state kind of have, right? It's like withholding funds. So if you didn't want to be a No Child Left Behind, we couldn't really the feds weren't going to shut your school down. They just weren't going to give you the allotted funds from, that was subsidizing. I don't want to speak out my neck on that, but I do like the question of are our expectations too high?
Yes.
But listen, I think if you apply in today's school, then you got to listen, man, like there's that story, I think was it MIT or something like that. Like, I think if you want to go to MIT, you got to be really, really, really good at math. Like, I don't want you to get into MIT just because you want to go there, but you're not prepared. Like, I'm somebody, my schools did not prepare me. I was also an EOP student. And I had to I was remedial everything. And that was my fucking school's fault, man. Like the high school I went to with them low ass expectations that they had. And I'm getting A's in these classes that don't mean nothing. Cause when I got on a college campus with standard, this is, nah, man, I need you to know actual trig. I need you to know this thing. And I didn't know it. Like the world is not going to make those concessions for me. So I believe in programs like EOS, EOP. I believe MECHA we had a MECHA, we had a Black Student Union. I love those affinity groups and those affinity organizations. And I also feel like if you want to go to Harvard, then you should be dope. You should have the dope qualities that they should make for Harvard. Now, if some of these places are changing their requirements, some of them are saying we don't want scores anymore. We want this or we want that. But it's always been a balance. Like, it was never just scores for UC Berkeley. It was scores. It was your essay. It was your extracurriculars. It was things like this. And I'm telling you, as parents out there, if you want your kid to go to a good school, see what they look for in those kids and then figure that out. Because here's the thing, right? Like, if you want to go to one of these higher upper echelon schools, it's just certain things that they're gonna take. I don't want improve stuff, bring us up to date on things. But I was on a hospital board. And we were trying to find Black doctors, Black surgeons, right? and it's really hard. It's really, really tough to get through those programs. But if you are a surgeon in residency and you don't pass the residency, you should not pass the residency. You get what I'm saying? Like if you can't do the thing, then you shouldn't necessarily do the thing. And I think that we have to get back to a place that tenured guy in New York just got fired or whatever, right? He was tenured, and I think he did. It was like physics is what he taught, and the kids were like, "This is too hard," and he was like, "This is fucking physics. I don't know what." Like, and they petition though, right? But see, this is the stuff that the DeSantis people will pick up on and they extrapolate. These young people like petitioned and they pushed and they prodded, and he was like, I'm not changing physics. Like physics is physics is physics. Like I've been doing this for 50 years. And eventually I think he left or whatever, right? Like this is what I'm saying. I think the majority of people are somewhere in this area. Like I want you to teach Black history and Brown history and what this country did. But if you teach me that, I don't automatically think all white people are just terrible people. Like, and I also believe in equity in other ways. I lived in Kentucky. That's the Appalachian. I think that there should be programs for people's kids who are kids of coal miners and their parents got cancer or something like that. And guess what? The majority of those people are white. And it's like, yo, I think that you should get that because I've seen what that has done to communities, man. We got to start being adults in this country again at some point. And I'm going to always be pro-Black and I'm going to always want to know what the truth is. But we so emotional that both sides of this scale who don't give a about any of you is going to play with your emotions until they get what they want and you ain't going to hear from them again.
So here's... I agree with you, right? The merit piece, the working hard, the actually being great. Let's do it, right? I'm for it. The problem for me comes down to if you got Rakeem Thomas and Elizabeth White and all of their merit is the same, right? All their achievements, I mean, they're going from toe to toe. Who gets chosen? So I feel like over the course of the history, when we started to acknowledge the need for these diversity programs, it's like, don't you just go based on the fact that you don't want Rakeem Thomas from East New York, Brooklyn to come to your Ivy League school because you think he's going to be smoking weed on the elevators, right? Because of your implicit biases that you're using to make this determination, right? So it's like, what is going to counter that kind of stuff without these programs in place? What forces the hand of people to not discriminate in decision making? And that's where it comes, because I feel like, okay, maybe we can't say that that every Black household has the same values, every Latino has the same values, blah blah, right? But the idea is that you got families really pushing their kids, right? Study, read, right? I don't care. School is out, still read. Take another class, take extra classes, go higher, go bigger, go better, do more, just to go toe to toe with someone who they're probably more qualified than and still not get a yes. To me, that's the point of these kinds of programs, to make sure that you're really being fair and judicious and not just allowing your implicit biases to make that determination. And historically, we've seen that more than anything. So what's going to make that change?
But I don't think I disagree with that, though. I think we all agree with you on there, like 100%, right? Like I think David said he's a product of affirmative action. I have benefited from similar type of programs or whatever the case is. So you have no disagreement with me from there. What I'm just telling people is like, look, there are many factors that they look at when you are trying to get into a school. It's your grades, it is your letter. I mean, it's your letters, it's your essay, it is your extracurricular. My parents didn't know shit about college. They didn't know anything in ways to help me, so I had to go do that stuff on my own. All right, man, I'm gonna play basketball. I'm gonna do debate. I got a 3-something GPA, and guess what? You still not gonna get into every fucking college that you apply to. Like you will be told no. Like it's just. You don't know. And I mean, I just think that, like, I agree with you, though. I'm just saying, I ain't mean to cut you off, Omar. I want you to go ahead and jump in. I 1000% agree with those programs and things. I guess the piece where I'm trying to take the conversation for me is because I know that the four of us genuinely agree on, and we all know what DeSantis is doing. I'm trying to give people out there, like, don't solely depend on that though, right? Like there's a thing about what we feel should be right, but there's also a reality. And if you want your kid to get these certain things, like you got to be prepared. Because one thing I learned growing up the way that I grew up is that the front door might close, but you better learn how to crack your ass through a window or through the back door. Now that's not the right thing to say. That is a systemic issue. That is not your fault that is happening. There's racism and sexism and classism. And then there's also still survival. Now we can have a larger, well, we shouldn't be having to survive. We should be able to thrive. And I ain't got no beef with that. I'm just telling you, if my black ass didn't have that mentality, then I wouldn't have gotten into school because my parents didn't know how to navigate that stuff.
I definitely thought you were going to say from the windows to the wall. That's really where I thought you were going with that. I got 3 quick points. So to answer Vita's question, are our expectations too high? I want to challenge that a little bit because on one end, no, on the other end, yes. And I'll give you 2 quick examples. So like on the end of like UT, I'm from Texas, right? Like UT was challenging a lot of these things again with affirmative action, not with DEI, excuse me. And like, is it too much to expect from UT in order to have these practices? And on one end, I'm like, well, they certainly freaking needed them because the level of racism at the University of Texas is absolutely atrocious, right? But like, I was also lucky enough to go to Stanford and Harvard. And I got to tell you, those 2 places who lead this country in research will definitively tell you one simple thing. Diversity amongst the workforce, diversity amongst a class of students is a exponential value add in the quality of education, the quality of conversation, the increase in understanding and intellect, the creative problem solving of a group of people, the diversity of thought within a group of people. So they are the ones pushing this. Harvard and Stanford have definitively said, I don't care what you're going to do, we're absolutely going to have diversity amongst our student class and amongst our workforce, because we have found without a shadow of doubt, scientifically, definitively, there is a massive value add to having this. So I don't think that we should have high expectations, because Stanford and Harvard both were totally white supremacist and like racist institutions, man. Harvard was created on making Native Americans essentially white. And like Stanford, oh my God, dude. If anyone knows anything about Leland Stanford and the railroad tycoons and the fact that he was a super racist billionaire, like, yeah, we like to change our history to make it seem like we were always the most inclusive. And we did become the first, really, amongst all those elite institutions to lead the way on diversity and inclusion and all that. But there is hope, Vita, because I think Stanford, Harvard, and the Ivy Leagues have proven that. But I want to take this in a quick direction when getting back to the question of this is a threat or an incentive. Because look, it's easy to say it's a threat, but I'm worried about some of the political implications as well. I think what DeSantis is also trying to do, DeSantis, who you got over there? Public enemy? Public enema? What the hell is that? Who the hell want a public enema anyways? What I think he's trying to do is convince Latinos, Blacks, Indians, and Asians, hey, guys, shouldn't you also be all about getting in on your merit and not getting a handout? Shouldn't this also be just totally about getting in based on your merit? Aren't you with this? And I think it's like a weird calling card to try to recruit Black, Mexican, Indian, and Asian people to the GOP. And I got to tell you, in places like South Texas, it's working. In places like Louisiana, it's working. In places like Florida, it's working. But this is the ultimate, and I kind of wrap up my thoughts.
You don't have to be white to be a white supremacist. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Indeed. But like, I think the ultimate thought here is that I'm going to agree with Stanford and Harvard and say it's a threat to the education and the productivity and efficiency of a group of people, a university, or a workforce to get rid of these things, because there's too much science to say that the more diverse the group is, the greater the output is. And I mean, dude, that's not just Stanford and Harvard proving all that research. You got Pew behind that. You've got Google behind that. You've got, you know, even like Microsoft will say something, and Microsoft just copies everybody because, you know, fuck them. But you've got major groups of people with definitive science saying this is a massive threat. So once again, it kind of brings up the question, like, who is DeSantis doing this for? And is he trying to create a white racist enclave in his state to be like, come to Florida, where you get to be white racist and drink Mountain Dew hard? Because I don't know why you would do this other than that.
Wow. Well, we've been having a grand old time. And guess what? It is time for final thoughts. Omar, that was like a grand slam though right there.
That's it. That's my final thought,
a mic
man. Like,
drop.
I'm good.
All right. Well, you're gonna need another mic drop in a minute, so we coming back. Dave, you're on.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Final thoughts.
Yeah. Let's see. Final thoughts. Yeah, that was great, Omar. I think it's important that we separate, and this is hard for a lot of people, to try and separate, you know, the virtue signaling and the political piece of it, especially as we're going into a presidential election, to try and understand what particular politicians or, you know, what initiatives they're pushing, right? Because a lot of that is, as was mentioned earlier, just based on like polling, like what resonates with people. I mean, they will sell, you know, babies if they have to, if it resonates with people. And so this is one of those moments where you have to, when you're trying to understand the behavior of politicians, you have to understand that, you know, it might not be what they really feel deep down in their soul. They're politicians, and they're trying to get elected. And then the other thing is, I think, you know, whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, you know, we still have this thing called government. And fundamentally, at the end of the day, I still believe that the government has a role to play in righting the wrongs of the past. There's no way we're going to be able to hit the reset button and say, you know, let's just unify. We have to look back at our history and recognize that the history of this country is, I mean, there are some high points and there are more low points, you know, starting with what happened with the Native Americans and African slavery, African Americans, and, you know, Mexican Americans in the Southwest. And that legacy continues to this day when you look at current living conditions for people. And so I feel like these programs that we're talking about, you know, not the full buffet of DEI, but certain elements of it do help, and they can help. They can help to address some of the wrongs of the past. And it doesn't mean that you have to lower expectations. Like, you know, I was a product of affirmative action, but at no point in my college career did anyone ever let me turn an assignment in late or lower a grading scale for me, right? It just helped get me in the door. And it means I had more resources in terms of support, but the expectations were the same as my peers who were white and Asian and African American, right? And I think that distinction is important. When we talk about affirmative action, we talk about even quotas in the workplace. We should not be talking about lowering expectations for actual performance if you're a student or performance if you are an employee. Those things all really matter. So I want to make sure to make that distinction. And I'll leave it there. Great topic, Jubilee. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Charles. That damn dog was quiet for most of this broadcast, huh? And she didn't even make an appearance because she's sleeping. My gift to you.
I don't even recognize what you just said. Listen, I would say today was a good topic. And I think that we started getting into it, like, you know what I'm saying, that middle point towards the end. Here's what I think, man. You know, I'm a product of a lot of things in this country that were designed to be able to help folks get ahead. I grew up on welfare. I grew up in the projects, which is a whole government subsidy. I ate from government subsidized food trucks. I'm forever grateful. And I'm also grateful for my grandmother who said, I said something one day like, man, I want to get one of the nice places here. And she looked at me and was about to slap me and was like, you will not live here as an adult. You know what I'm saying? I think we need to have those things to help people that need it. I think that there have been a lot of historical wrongs that have been done in this country, and we should know about them. And we should talk about them. And at the same time, too, don't let anybody like give you less than. I deal in traditional public schools across this country, and we will celebrate approaching and in lieu of talking about who's actually able to read. We will celebrate, well, I got these 9th graders and now half of them is reading at 6th grade level. We have made some progress, and I get that, but the goal is still the goal. I think it's racist when people like are okay with people that look like me, that I love and care about, being able to do less than. And I think what we need to do is we need to be making sure that our schools have quality people in them. Our schools have people in them that are teaching them these things. You can't stop a good teacher from actually teaching what the truth is. So don't allow us to hire bad teachers. You know what I mean? Stop giving us the people that fell into this profession, but people that wanted to be in this profession. And you know, my friend Sharif does a lot of work around getting good Black people into classrooms, not just Black people. I love being Black. I love learning about who I am, but most of the things that I learned to value did not come into school, and it didn't come on my state college campus. Like, as a community, as Black people, as brown people, push them systems, because slavery paid for most of these damn campuses. So have at it. Get what you need. And at the same time, recognize when somebody is lowering the bar for you, because that's the most disrespectful shit that somebody can do. I can do whatever you can do, and I can do it with everything that was on my back, everything that I've built, and everything that people like that people in here have built. You know what I'm saying? Like, we are smart, capable people, and don't let them lull you to sleep. So DeSantis is crazy. But I also think that some of his liberal counterparts on the other end is crazy. And I think that here's the thing. They're crazy like a fox. They don't believe half that shit on either side of it. You are currency to be spent and collected, and you need to realize and recognize that. So now you can start to make business decisions, because that's what this upcoming election is. Where are you going to fall? Are they going to be able to play to your emotions, or are you going to be able to hear facts and discern? And I hope that for the answer for us as Black people and my brown friends, that we lean more on discernment, because I don't need you to love me, but I do need you to fairly give me what I deserve.
Well, there you have. I'm just going to add one thing to that, because
I definitely thought you were going to say playing with my money is like playing with my emotions.
That is also true.
Well, I just want to piggyback on that and say, as a people, you know, as people of color, we've got to continue to be excellent, right? Despite what anyone is saying, right? The academic excellence, like, let's keep pushing for that. So that when it comes time for us to come to the table, to Charles's point, like, we don't need, right, a quote unquote handout, or for anyone to lower the bar, because we made it into the door by way of what we earned versus what was given to us. And then the last thing I want to say is, if we want to reset, that's fine, but let's reset with reparations, resources, and equity. If you want to give us that, then we can start to discuss whether or not we can eliminate DEIA processes and programs. I'm Jubilee. That's Dave. That's Omar. And that's Doc Charles. And we are the South Star Classroom. Thanks for tuning in.